staying with us. After suffering heavy losses in Iraq, the Islamic State is now stepping up its efforts to target Iran. According to a report in the Washington Post, ISIS has released a stream of propaganda threatening more bloodshed and boosting recruitment among the country's Sunni minority groups. Take a look.
On the 7th of June, there were twin attacks in Iran's capital, Tehran. The first involved 4 gunmen who targeted parliament, sending people fleeing in panic. The other, a suicide bomber, targeted the mausoleum of Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic. The Islamic State claimed responsibility for both attacks. Now, it's threatening more bloodshed in Iran. According to the Washington Post, the Islamic State has stepped up its efforts to target Iran, releasing a stream of propaganda and threatening more attacks. The report says that the Islamic State may have seen the attack as something which could revive the flagging morale of its cadres and boost recruitment from among Iran's Sunni minority groups.
Propagating gory videos by ISIS is not unusual, as the group normally uses such techniques to make fears among enemies, justify and legitimize their crimes, recruit new members, or even assert their presence. It is a tactic by terrorist groups which have passed through the blind operation phase, in which when they face military difficulties, they conduct operations which do not have any military effectiveness, and its aim is only to boost morale and motivate recruits. As we have seen, this has happened in an attack to the Iranian parliament less than 2 months ago. However, in that recent video, ISIS promises to conquer Iran, which appears to be a response to the increasing offensive on them by the Syrian Arab army forces and their Iranian allies.
So why is Iran the target of the Islamic State? Well, Iran is a key force in the battle against ISIS in Syria. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is fighting for the Assad government and is also backing Shia militia in Iraq. It's not very well known that Iran was at one point funding the Islamic State. Seeing it as an element in its ideological war against the West, Iran had also backed Al-Qaeda for similar reasons, going to the extent of giving sanctuary to members of Osama bin Laden's family. But with Iranian-backed governments firmly in power in Iraq and Syria, Tehran probably sees no need to covertly fund Sunni groups, including the Islamic State, anymore. It may even be worried about its marginalized Sunni minority population gravitating to the Islamic State. The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani recently reached out to Sunni leaders to counter the growing threat of extremism within the community. It's to be seen if reaching out at this stage works, but whether that is successful or not, Iran is firmly in the crosshairs of the Islamic State. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, and WION's Maral Ghulampur joins me live from Tehran for more on this. Maral, thanks so much for joining me. Now, the assault that Tehran saw in the month of June this year, it was actually stunning, both in the way it was executed and symbolism as well. 18 people died in that attack. The signs really were unmissable. Did Tehran not see this coming?
Yes, hello, Sana. You're correct. Well, being able to provide security against terrorism is something Iranian regime has always taken credit for. So Iranian officials always used to boast about security that regime has provided for citizens, and it has been commonly highlighted that Iran is the only terrorist-free country in the region, where all its neighbors from Afghanistan to Iraq and Syria are falling victim to acts of terror. So it has been promoted even as a basis for Iranian regime's legitimacy in the face of opposition in the country. And this is for this reason that military and intelligence services in Iran take great measures to make the security demands possible as much as they can.
And, you know, it's a well-known fact that Iran is fighting the Islamic State on many, many fronts, really. Would you say that that makes the fight against the Islamic State inside of Iran that much more important?
Well, ironically, you know, there's a doctrine of Iranian regime which they believe that if they don't fight terrorism in neighboring countries, they will have to fight them in Iran sooner or later. So, and the logic behind all proxy wars that's going on in the region for the time being, and these proxy wars may involve Iran, Qatar, or Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and their allies. So, I don't see this as an Iranian. I don't see this as a cause and effect. It's a matter of here or there. As one of the Saudi officials highlighted in a statement a while ago, they said that we won't allow the war to come to our shores and we will take the war to Iran. So I think it's more a matter of where this is happening rather than the part Iran has played in proxy wars in Syria and Iraq.
All right. You know, the numbers, Maral, might not be significant, but only if a few of these, Sunni minority young boys, they get radicalized, this could mean more June-like attacks really in Tehran. And that indeed is a big, big cause for worry for Hassan Rouhani, who's, taken charge again for the second time with a huge mandate.
Yeah, that's correct. I think ISIS, in fact, is becoming less of a threat inside Iran because its allies, Iran and its allies are raging offense on their fronts in Syria. ISIS never managed to get close to the Iranian border, and now they are retreating further away. So its proximity is decreasing. Moreover, their ideology is not attractive to the Iranians as well, or even Sunni minorities, because although there has always been some tension between Sunnis and the government, you don't really see them stepping up to the face of the government. And Iran has been a culturally and religiously diverse country, but Iranian people have proven that they stand united in the face of a foreign enemy.
Well, let's hope so. That sentiment continues and Iran is able to battle this threat that is knocking, or rather is at the doorstep. Thanks so much, Maral, for joining us there. Maral joining me from Tehran on that story. We move on. Furious anti-tourism demonstrations in Spain are spreading across Europe and threatening thousands of summer holidays as outraged locals demand holidaymakers stop invading their cities across southern Europe. From the choked boulevards of Gaudi's Barcelona to the swarms of cruise liners disgorging passengers into Croatia's medieval Dubrovnik, residents are complaining that a sharp rise in tourism is making life intolerable. The backlash has sparked concerns for one of the region's biggest economic drivers and prompted authorities to act. Rome is considering limiting visitor numbers to parts of the Eternal City, such as the Trevi Fountain. Dubrovnik plans to limit cruise ships. Barcelona is planning a new tourism tax. In Venice last month, residents marched through a throng of visitors to protest against uncontrolled tourism. They did so behind a banner which stated, "My future is Venice." Youth activists have planned a similar protest in San Sebastian in North Spain later this month. Tourism makes up 12% of Spain's economy. In fact, Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy intervened after some anti-tourist anger turned physical. He described the activists as extremists going against the common sense, rather. In fact, tourism to southern Europe has surged over the past 2 years, partly because visitors are choosing the region over other Mediterranean destinations where security fears are a concern, like Tunisia, Egypt and Turkey. Visitors to Spain climbed 12% in the first half of 2017 to 36.4 million. Barcelona draws at least 11 million visitors a year and is planning a new tax that will hit cruise ships. $1 for each visitor staying less than 12 hours. About 750 cruise ships docked at Barcelona last year. Tourist arrivals in Italy have risen to a modest 1% in 2016 to almost 56 million, but hotel staff members, the stays in hotels, in fact, were up 4.8% in the first half of this year. Foreign visitors to the glorious of Rome, Florence and Venice, they surged 31.5% between 2009 and 15. Elsewhere, Portugal expects a record 27 million visitors this year, and Greece a record 28 million, but neither has seen a backlash. We are going to be talking about what is the overarching reason then for this sort of a backlash that many of these countries in southern Europe are seeing increasingly. It spread from Spain to now various parts in Italy. In fact, Giuliano Battista, who is a freelance journalist and a researcher, he joins me right now from Terni in Italy. Giuliano, thanks so much for joining us. Let me start by asking you, what do you believe is the big reason behind this kind of backlash or this anti-tourist sentiment that we're seeing city after city, especially in South Europe?
Well, we are facing a huge amount of people coming to a touristic city. There are very vulnerable environment like in Venice, where you have overwhelming number of people using services and facilities in the city. So the citizens are quite
All right, we seem to have lost that Skype link with Giuliano. We'll try and go back to him in just a bit. But, you know, reports say that there are banners which say tourists should die. They have been scribbled on the windows of a city tour bus in Barcelona. Many such similar instances have been reported from several parts of Spain, Venice, Rome, even Croatia at this point. Surprisingly, countries like Greece, which have been grappling with the migrant crisis, haven't really seen these kind of anti-tourist sentiment or protests in the country at this point. But at the same time, these demonstrations come as they have been a spike in the number of tourists that have started visiting these exotic destinations in Europe, with monuments of historical monuments, in fact, especially a lot of tourists from India also throng to various destinations all across Europe each year during the summer vacations and even the winter holiday season. We'll try and go back to Giuliano Battista in just a few moments to get his perspective on what exactly is the reason behind these anti-tourism tourist demonstrations that we're seeing in many countries in southern Europe. And these, according to some reports, are even violent at a few occasions. In fact, tourists going to Europe have seen a surge, at least saw a 1% rise in the number of tourists visiting the country. Hotspots like Rome, Florence, Venice, Spain, they saw a 31.5% surge between the years of 2009 and 2015. All right, we'll try and get you more on that story, but right now it's time for us to move ahead. Well, the Indian community in the United States is not too happy with President Donald Trump's comments on Charlottesville violence. With his comments, Donald Trump tried to calm the nerves, but his statements led to more protests, in fact, in Washington. Take a look.
I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
This latest statement by US President Donald Trump has miffed the Indian American community. The community has condemned President Trump's statements on Charlottesville violence, calling it a disgrace. Two Indian American congressmen have expressed their anger against Trump's comments. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy lamented on the fact that it took Donald Trump 2 days to issue a statement, saying the United States knew the price of hate too well to deny it. Ami Bera, a congressman from California, said that the Charlottesville violence is an example of what happens when politicians tolerated hatred and bigotry. President Donald Trump, in his fresh statement, said the counter-protesters were also to blame for the violence at the race-fueled riots.
You had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest, and very legally protest, because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this, there are two sides to a story.
Trump's statement gave reason enough to protesters to gather outside Trump towers across cities in the United States. Hundreds of protesters rallied to denounce the murderous rampage in Charlottesville, calling the statements by President Trump ambiguous. Even the British Prime Minister could not resist taking a swipe at the US President.
There's no equivalence, I see no equivalence between those who propound fascist views and those who oppose them. And I think it is important for all those in positions of responsibility to condemn far-right views wherever we hear them.
With celebrities and business leaders condemning Trump's reaction to Charlottesville incident, the US president faces isolation on yet another issue of importance. While Trump attempted to calm the situation with his revised statement, he ended up doing just the opposite, adding fuel to the fire. Bureau Report, WION.
And Sierra Leone starts a week-long mourning period for the victims of flooding that killed more than 400. Hundreds more are missing. President Koroma fought back tears as he toured the worst-hit regions. In fact, 3 days of torrential rain triggered mudslides starting Monday in the Regent area of the capital of Freetown. There was also massive flooding elsewhere in the city, one of the world's wettest urban areas. Here's a look at the present situation.
Death, destruction, panic. Sierra Leone is battling one of the worst ever floods. The death toll after a mudslide that swept through the Regent area of Freetown has been rising constantly. It's a calamity of massive proportions.
I saw the hills on the top of the mountain here, that is the Sierra Leone Peninsula mountain, coming down like a fire. It was like a thunder when the storm was coming, like a tornado. A good number of the houses were covered because I was standing right at the back here, standing here seeing what is happening. I had to rush to go back to see exactly what is happening. I realized that there was a church which people normally come for night prayers. Everybody was covered at that day. It was terrible. And even houses, you see people rolling.
On Wednesday, the president issued a desperate appeal for help. Several international organizations and countries have pledged support, including Nigeria, Israel, and Liberia.
Children, women have lost their lives on a single day. Can you imagine? And this is a family matter. It affects different families. This is so heart-wrenching.
The Red Cross has warned that it is a race against time to find survivors.
This is the worst disaster we've ever had in this country because even during the Ebola, highest number of deaths per day within 24 hours during Ebola was 111 people. Even January 6, when the rebels entered Freetown, we never saw this kind of catastrophe.
Anxious crowds milled around the hospital in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, as bodies piled up at the mortuary. A mass burial is planned on Wednesday to free up space. Sierra Leone was one of the 3 West African nations hit by an outbreak of Ebola virus in 2014. More than 4,000 people were killed in that calamity, and the country has been struggling to revive its economy since then. Sierra Leone is ranked 179th out of 188 countries on the United Nations Human Development Index. The mudslide is set to send the nation skidding. Bureau Report, WION.